I recently, about a month ago, went to a writers conference where I was able to pitch agents live. As I was preparing for that, I was looking for resources on how to pitch agents, and there honestly was not very much out there. I think probably due to our post-pandemic situation, there just weren't a lot of live events anymore, or for a while there, and now that they're starting to come back in different forms, I thought I would make one because I feel like I really have a good idea of how it went and how to prepare well. And I think it was very successful for me. So I thought I would just impart my wisdom onto you. I don't typically do these kind of sit down, tell you how to do things videos. So if I'm a little rusty, I'm sorry. And I'm by no means an expert. So I am unagented and unpublished. Hopefully that will change soon. I just went to this conference just about a month ago, and both of my pitches went very well. One agent requested the full manuscript and is still currently reading and giving me feedback. And then another agent wasn't taking full manuscripts, but encouraged me to query her, and we had a great conversation. So, I think on the pitch end of things, I'll just kind of share what my experience was and maybe some things that might help you prepare. So how I'm gonna sort of structure this is first what to expect. Like, what does it look like? What are you walking into? And then I'm gonna talk about how to structure a verbal pitch and how that might be different from a query letter. And then I'll end with just some other extraneous tips. Again, just my advice, but it kind of helps to have some sort of game plan. And all of the resources that I had found that they sent prior to the conference were not actually about what to say in a pitch. They were about how to be a person. Half of the tips were if they say no, don't keep telling them to say yes. Just kind of common sense things. So I'll kind of just tell you how this one went for me. So they were 10-minute pitch sessions. They were a separate fee in addition to the cost of the conference. So I think they were about $30 per pitch. And that was kind of the whole reason I was going to the conference in the first place. So I was like, that's fine. And you could see all of the agents beforehand. So I researched through the list of people that they had and picked 2 people that I wanted to pitch to. And I don't know how this works at other conferences. This conference was a pretty small conference. There were probably around 10 to 15, I think probably around 10 agents there. I'm really bad at numbers. The way it looked was there was a schedule for the whole day of a pitch schedule. So you knew what time you had, and it was pretty back to back. So there wasn't a lot of intermediate time, and it was at a hotel, and it was in this sort of a conference room, and there were all these tables set up, kind of like if you were to go to a career fair and there's booths, a job fair, something like that, or a conference, I guess. So how it went at the conference I went to, we all waited in a hallway outside 10 minutes, in the 10 minutes before your session. And the ladies there were very nice. They kind of gave us the lowdown of how everything would work. So they said they give the people in the room a warning at 5 minutes and then at 1 minute. That's because it's very every 10 minutes they would switch out people so that everybody had the full time. And in the hallway, at 1 minute before, you would all kind of line up. And how they described it was you would go and stand right behind the chair of the person currently pitching. And then usually the person who was pitching would just get up and leave when they saw the next person coming, end their conversation. But sometimes the admin would tap them and be like, your time's up, time to head out. And then you would just sit down and then go. And I think something important to remember is that literary agents are often book people. Well, they are book people, that's their job. They are nervous too. And any situation where you're just sitting down in front of a total stranger is gonna start off a little awkward. And so you just sit down, and one of the agents, I could tell she'd done this 100 times. She was like, hey, how's it going? Tell me about your book. So that was just a great intro to just say my pitch. I had a 90-second pitch practiced and ready. So then I just gave my pitch. So my recommendation would be to have some way to lead into your pitch without just sitting down and saying, my story is about blah, blah, blah. The first agent I sat down with, we kind of sat there in awkward silence for 1 second because I was actively just so stressed. And I sat down and I just looked at her and I was like, hi, how's it going? She was like, great. And I was like, do you want to hear my pitch? That's just what I started with. And she was like, yeah, great. And she seemed relieved when I said that too, because I think that's obviously what you're going to, you're going there to pitch. So they don't want to have a small talk conversation with you, and you probably don't want to have a small talk conversation with them. It's a little abrupt to sit down and be like, the wedding season is about, you know, sitting down being like, hey, how's it going? Great. Do you want to hear my pitch? That's what I would recommend. Usually, oftentimes they'll lead the conversation. If not, just ask that and then they will say yes. And the other agent that I met with, I sat down and she immediately was like, just so you know, I'm not requesting anything today from anybody. So you can use this time to pitch, you can use this time to ask questions, all this, like she just like kind of laid that out. And then I was like, okay, I still want to do my pitch. And so I just asked again, awesome, sounds good. Do you mind if I give you my pitch? And then I went into the pitch, which I'll get into in a little bit. So that's kind of the environment. And so like all of the tables, all the agents were in the same room. It might not be the same for every conference, but that's how it was there. And the 10 minutes actually went by very quickly. So my pitch, like I said, was around 90 seconds, 2 minutes, something like that. The first agent, I immediately finished my pitch and she was like, awesome, I'd love to see more. And I died on the inside and I was like, okay, right now I can. So then she gave me information on how to send her a full manuscript. And then there was still like 5 minutes left. So she asked, what questions do you have for me? And then I asked a question about her manuscript wish list. There was an item on there that it was in her don't list and it kind of affected my book. I want to ask her for clarification on what did you mean by this thing in your manuscript wish list. And I think that was actually a good move because it showed that I had like read her manuscript wish list and like I knew who she was and that kind of thing. So that would be another tip I'd have, is to research the agents that you're pitching so that if it's a longer pitch session and you get done early, you have things to ask about. So then we talked about that item on her manuscript wish list. And then I just asked, like there were still 2 minutes left. And I was like, so, you know, what are usually the things that if you see them in the first pages, you'll immediately sort of reject? Like what are those red flags that you look for? So I would just have a couple questions in mind to ask them because they're inevitably gonna ask, like, what questions do you have for me? Anything with literary agents, they see so many pitches and hear so many things that oftentimes they'll know pretty early on. I was speaking to a couple other people at the conference who had it like when they pitched their book, the agent asked them about certain elements, like how many drafts have you done? Is it a series? That kind of thing. So that's what you can kind of expect. But at the 10-minute mark, then the person was behind me and I was like, oh, well, thank you so much for your time. I'll be sure to send you my materials. Walked out of the room. You can even use that as a script if you want, because I think sometimes those, like, how do you introduce yourself and how do you leave the conversation pieces, like that's what I was so stressed about, was that stuff, which is like, they don't care about that, but it might just help you to feel a little better to prepare that. So next up is the pitch itself. So what to include in that pitch. Again, I'm not an expert in this. I just heard everywhere, like keep it under 2 minutes, just in case you run out of time somehow. Follow a similar structure to your query letter. So you want to include the title, the genre, the word count. If you've written a query letter, that's usually how you start a query letter as well, is that like front matter of like, what is the book, what genre is it, how long is it? Overall, just like make sure you have your query letter and all of that materials as good as you can first. Even send a few queries before you go, because I just kind of took my query letter and reframed it. So then after the front matter, what I have heard is starting with the story is about and then your character and what their problem is. Why can't they solve that problem? That's kind of your first chunk. Then going into what other things develop because of that? What choices do they make because of that? And what are the stakes? Really hitting home with what are the stakes, ending it there. So I think the easiest way to kind of show you this in my pitch, which again, I don't have a literary agent, so I don't know if this is actually a good pitch, but it was successful in a full request from a conference, which is kind of the best case scenario. So give me critiques if you want. So my pitch was, The Wedding Season is an adult thriller complete at 75,000 words. It's about a wedding DJ named Eileen who is really done with DJing weddings, just between all the drunk people and some, serious creeps. She just wants to be done. So while she's DJing a wedding for this really wealthy family, she's offered this opportunity to DJ their other daughter's weddings over the upcoming summer for just a ridiculous amount of money. So despite having a really rocky, weird set of encounters with the members of this family at this wedding, she decides, you know what, I'll take the 3 weddings, I'll do it this one last summer, and then I can be done. It's immediately revealed that this is a bad decision when each wedding comes with its own dead body. And she starts to ask herself, like, what has she gotten herself into? What else does this family have in store for her? And why did they choose her specifically to DJ these weddings in the first place? So I actually am a wedding DJ, and I kind of borrowed from a lot of my experience of seeing kind of the most extremes of people at their weddings. So while I've never encountered any serial killers at any weddings that I've DJ'd, you really can see the potential of it at those kind of events. So that was kind of what inspired me to write it. If you notice in my pitch, I kind of try to talk like I'm just like off the cuff telling you about my book. No, it was very intentionally planned and said in a specific way. So I really tried to structure it, stats, who she is, what's the problem, what's her solution, why it was a bad idea, and what are the stakes for her, and then my own personal, like, why I'm the best person to write this book. You don't need to include that if you don't actually have a connection to it. I think it's actually very rare to have that kind of a connection to the book that you're writing. That's actually the reason I wrote this book, if I'm honest. Well, one, I needed to vent about DJing weddings, and also I did see a lot of murderous potential in a lot of Mother of the Brides, but also I knew that I had that personal connection to the book, and so it makes it more marketable for me. So that I would give that pitch, and then they would respond with whatever. So that's the example of my pitch. That's what my book, The Wedding Season, is about. I'm currently querying it. There's like so many vlogs of this book from draft 1 on this channel, so if you want to check that out, feel free. If you want more info, actually that's the most info you've ever gotten about the book, so there's no more info than that. But oh, and with one agent, I actually ended up, like, she was talking about genre, and so she asked me, like, what happens later in the book, right? So don't spoil the book in the blurb. It's like a query letter where you want to keep them intrigued, but you don't want to give away the whole plot of the book. So that's kind of how I would structure the pitch. I'm trying to think of any other things I would say in concern to the pitch itself. Practice it a bunch, but also practice telling it to people. So like, call your mom and give her the pitch, or send it. I have this Snapchat. I was like, oh, you want to know what my book's about? Excellent question. And then I went into the pitch, just and sent that to people. So like, practice not only saying it, but telling it to people, right? Because like, as I was pitching, like the agents would like laugh, like respond to what I was saying, because they're actually human beings, one might say. There's such a wide variety of people at these conferences, which is great. Just a lot of different layers of knowledge and experience. I would say if you're seeking out a video like this, you've probably researched other things like how to write a query letter, when to query, how ready does your manuscript need to be, how long should your manuscript be, all those things. And if you haven't, I really recommend checking out Bookends Literary. It's a literary agency. It's here on YouTube. They have just a lot of good information about querying and when your book is ready to be queried and like all these things. I remember they have this video that's like 10 things you need to do before querying your book. I watched that video, I'm not even joking, 5 years ago or however long it's existed. And I wrote them down like a checklist, and it took me like 3 years to complete everything on the checklist, but it was so helpful to have a resource like that. So I would check that out and check out like first page critiques on YouTube, all these things to just get as much knowledge as possible. That being said, there were some people who like clearly knew a lot of things about publishing and about the world of publishing. And then there were people who really didn't. Like, I was talking to this lovely man who was talking about his book that he was pitching, and it was 150,000 words. I was like, oh my gosh, what genre is it? And he was like, I don't know. And he said it's part memoir of his life, but also part fiction, all this stuff. And it's so long, and he'd only just written the first draft of it and was like, I think it's ready. I'm sure that there are like very few people in the world who can do that, but like maybe it's possible. And there was just a lot of conversations in the green room, like in the hallway right before you went in, about like, does YA start at 12 or 15? Like, is my book about I met a lot of people who had fantasy projects that were like 175,000 words and were like needed to be part of a series. And just like a lot of things that are fine. And like, I wouldn't say don't query or don't go to literary agents pitch sessions or whatever with these things, but I think that those conversations probably went a little bit differently. I would say it's pretty common knowledge from what I've consumed. Anything over like 120 or 150,000, I've never seen a query form that accepts anything over 150,000 words. I don't mean this to say like, I was so much more informed than everyone else there. I more say it to say like, wherever you're at in your like writing knowledge and career, I would definitely go. Cause I was chatting with this girl who, she knew her book was not query ready, but she had a pitch session and she went in with the intention to like ask the agent, like, here's what I have so far. Like these are the ideas I have. Is this something that's marketable? What should I be focused on? Like, so you can go in with questions too. There's lots of different ways to do this. But if you're at the point where you're really wanting to start seriously like getting published, you know, and not just like being in the process of getting published, I would really do a lot of research about like querying and manuscript polishing and editing and all those things, like how many rounds of revision should you do? Should you have beta readers or not? That kind of stuff. And I would say that any advice that you've heard in terms of querying and researching literary agents and anything to do with querying translates here as well. So don't like go in and assume that your book is the best book in the world, or go in and try to pitch them something that they don't represent. Like, this is essentially just a query letter, but on steroids, because you can actually make a connection with them and get your voice across and know that you're actually talking to them. Because I think it's hard querying because you don't know who's reading it. You don't know if it's an intern, and I'm not saying that I think interns are very helpful in the publishing world, and I don't mind the idea of interns looking through query letters because they know what the agent is looking for. But there's so many things that you don't know, like when you send off a query letter into the abyss. I would encourage you to do it if you have the chance, because not only does it help make a really solid connection with an agent, it reinforces that like publishing is hard and it is selective and it is terrifying, but it's also made up of real people who have preferences and have thoughts and ideas. Another thing, this is not directly about the pitch sessions, but I think it's sort of related. There was also a first page like live critique, and just watching that, it's just so interesting because they'll read a page and then 5 different literary agents will all have such different opinions. Like, one will be like, that's great, I want to read more because I like these. And they would say like, oh, I like it when a book starts like that. And like, there's this, and then another agent would be like, that's tacky, I don't like that. So it just is such a solid, firm reminder of like, we're essentially having conversations about preferences. Once you get your book edited and polished and good is so subjective, but like the best that it can be, it's more of a matchmaking game. It's about who's the right fit, but when all you get is rejections, it doesn't feel like a matchmaking game anymore. It feels like my book is just bad. And sometimes that's the case. Books can be bad, but most of the time it's just not the right fit. And I think going to a conference and meeting an agent and seeing that has been very helpful for me. Highly recommend. To wrap all that up, prepare, but also don't over prepare. Practice with real people. I know that the agents want to say yes. The reason they're at a pitch session is because they want books. Like, they want to say yes to somebody. So make it easy for them to say yes with how prepared you are and how clean you are. Well, thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you like this kind of sit-down video. I'll be back with another vlog, I'm sure, soon. I'm also doing live sprints, writing sprints in the mornings, 6 a.m. Tuesday and Thursday Central Time this week. So come write with me, and I will see you later. Bye.